as we move forward, we're looking at the president holding a rally in Michigan at the very time the vote is set to potentially impeach him, the third president in American history to be impeached. Is there a strategy to focus this and make it timely, in part because of the president's very dramatic reaction to the facts being put out before him?
I would say the timing is driven more by the fact that the plot continues, we've had a lot of discussion. Should we wait, try to bring in more witnesses? It's taken us 8 months to go from subpoena to a first court decision in Don McGahn. And given that the president has made clear he's not going to stop seeking foreign intervention in our election, he's out on the White House lawn saying that if we're being honest, there's a simple answer. I want Ukraine to do this investigation.
Right.
His lawyer, even this week, was in Ukraine seeking to dig up the same kind of dirt. So the timing is really driven by the urgency, and that is
a national security issue.
Yes, a national security issue, an issue of our election integrity. If the president is seeking still to essentially cheat in the next election, that is not a remedy for his misconduct. The remedy is impeachment. And that's why we've moved forward, and we've done so, methodically, but nonetheless with a sense of urgency.
Chairman, I want to give you a chance to respond to what the president said about you in his letter to Nancy Pelosi yesterday. But first, I want to ask you about one of the criticisms we've heard from Republicans, heard again from Ranking Member Collins in that Rules Committee hearing yesterday, which is that this process had a set calendar, that you've rushed to the end of it, that you wanted to get out of town by the end of this week, get the vote in, and that Republicans believe there ought to be a more fulsome process with more witnesses and more evidence presented and time to get documents to come in. What do you say to the criticism that this process has gone too quickly?
Well, Mr. Collins would have more credibility if he were joining us and saying to the administration, provide Congress the documents, respond to the subpoenas, they're lawful, you need to answer. He'd have more credibility if he said, let's bring in Bolton, let's bring in Mulvaney, let's bring in Pompeo, let's bring in others that have firsthand relevant information. But of course, he's not saying that. And neither is Mitch McConnell. They don't want to hear these witnesses. They do want to complain about process, but at the same time, they don't really want to see the evidence. And the fact is, the evidence is really already uncontested and overwhelming. If we have yet additional witnesses who further corroborate what we already know, yes, it makes the case that much stronger. But the case is already overwhelming. And so I think those process objections fall flat when they're not really interested in having those witnesses come in or receiving those documents.
So the president did write that rambling 6-page letter to Speaker Pelosi yesterday. In it, he writes, quote, Congressman Adam Schiff cheated and lied all the way up to the present day, even going so far as to fraudulently make up out of thin air my conversation with President Zelensky of Ukraine and read this fantasy language to Congress as though it were said by me. The president continued, his shameless lies and deceptions dating all the way back to the Russia hoax is one of the main reasons we are here today. How do you respond?
That's probably the nicest thing he's had to say about me in quite some time. This president does nothing but project onto others his own lack of morality. This is someone who mocks others constantly but can't stand to be mocked himself. Look, the call record speaks for itself, and it's damning. He doesn't want to defend it. He can't defend it. He doesn't want to explain why he held up $400 million in military aid to coerce an ally at war with Russia into doing his election dirty work. He'd rather attack me. When Bob Mueller was the investigator, he attacked Bob Mueller. When Colonel Vindman is testifying, he attacks Colonel Vindman. When Marie Yovanovitch is testifying, he attacks her. Anyone willing to stand up to him, he's going to go after. I just view it as a part of my job, and I'm going to keep my focus on holding this president accountable.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.